I didn't hear a scream. That's the part that haunts me. There was no scream because she didn't slip. I saw the reflection in the glass of the trail map, my brother's hand flat against my pregnant wife's back. One hard, calculated shove. I watched Ivy's body fold over the railing and plummet 40 feet into the freezing river below. I didn't freeze. I didn't think. The billionaire CEO died in that second, and the Army Ranger woke up. I vaulted the rail and followed her down. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The impact hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. The water was black, freezing, and violent. It punched the air out of my lungs instantly, spinning me around in a chaotic vortex of bubbles and darkness. The cold was agonizing, like 1,000 knives stabbing my skin at once, but my mind was crystal clear. Find her, or die trying. I kicked hard, fighting the churning current that was trying to drag me downstream toward the rapids. My boots felt like lead weights, dragging me under, but I ignored the burning in my muscles. I scanned the murky gloom, searching for the pale yellow of Ivy's summer dress. There, a shadow, drifting 20 feet away, sinking fast. I swam with everything I had. My arms cut through the water, fueled by a level of adrenaline I hadn't felt since my last deployment in Syria. I reached her, grabbing her waist. She was limp, terrifyingly limp. I pulled her against me, shielding her stomach, shielding my unborn son, as I kicked toward the surface. My lungs were screaming for air. My vision was spotting with black dots. We broke the surface with a violent splash. I gasped, sucking in jagged breaths of air, but Ivy didn't make a sound. Her head lolled back against my shoulder, her beautiful face pale and waxy, her lips turning blue. I got you. I choked out, fighting the river's pull. I got you, Ivy. Don't you quit on me. I dragged us toward the muddy riverbank, my boots slipping on the slime-covered rocks. I hauled her body onto the grass, falling to my knees beside her. It was deathly silent down here, just the rushing water and the pounding of my own heart in my ears. I checked her pulse. Nothing. No, I growled. No, no, no. I tilted her head back, pinched her nose, and breathed air into her lungs. One breath, 2 breaths. Then I moved to her chest. Push, push, push. Come on, I yelled, my voice cracking. Fight, Ivy. Fight. From high above on the bridge, I heard them. Hunter. Oh my God. Hunter. It was Dominic. My brother. My business partner. The man who had been the best man at my wedding. His voice was laced with panic. Perfect, theatrical panic. I'm calling 911. Dominic screamed down. Hold on. We saw her slip. We're coming down. Slip. The word made my blood run colder than the river. I didn't look up. I couldn't. If I looked at him right now, I would kill him. I would climb back up that ravine and tear him apart with my bare hands. And right now, Ivy needed a medic, not a murderer. I kept pumping her chest. Stay focused, Ranger. The mission isn't over. Suddenly, Ivy's body jerked. She convulsed, vomiting river water onto the grass. She gasped, a horrible, rattling sound, sucking in air like a drowning woman. That's it, I whispered, pulling her shivering body into my arms, wrapping her tight to share whatever body heat I had left. I'm here. I'm right here. Her eyes fluttered open. They were wide, blown with terror. She grabbed my wet shirt, her knuckles turning white. She looked past me, her eyes darting up toward the bridge structure looming overhead. She wheezed, her voice barely audible over the river. He pushed. I pressed my lips to her forehead. Shoo, save your strength. Hunter. Dominic, I know. I whispered into her ear, my voice dropping to a lethal, low register. I know, baby. I saw him. She started to sob, her body shaking violently from shock and hypothermia. My baby is the baby. The baby is strong. Like you. I lied. I didn't know. I had no idea if my son had survived the impact. The thought made a dark, red rage swell inside me, threatening to take over. I heard scrambling on the rocks behind us. Dominic and his wife, Morgan, came sliding down the embankment, mud staining their expensive hiking clothes. "Oh, thank God!" Morgan shrieked, rushing toward us. She fell to her knees, reaching for Ivy's hand. "Ivy, Ivy, can you hear me? You just stumbled. I saw your heel catch on the root." I watched Morgan closely. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were too wide. She was trying too hard. She was terrified, not that Ivy was hurt, but that Ivy was alive. I looked at Dominic. He was standing back a few feet, breathing hard. His eyes weren't on Ivy. They were on me. He was assessing the threat. He was checking to see if I bought the story. This was the moment. The most dangerous moment of my life. If I accused them now, it was my word against theirs. 2 against 1. They would say I was hysterical, grieving, hallucinating from the shock. They would lawyer up. They would bury the truth. No, a ranger doesn't fire until he has a confirmed target and a clean line of sight. I pulled Ivy closer, shielding her from Morgan's touch. I looked up at my brother. I forced my face to crumble. I forced the tears to come. I let the ranger disappear and the broken husband take the stage. She fell. I choked out, my voice trembling. I couldn't grab her fast enough. I saw Dominic's shoulders drop half an inch. The tension left his jaw. He bought it. "It was an accident, Hunter," Dominic said, stepping forward and putting a heavy hand on my wet shoulder. "A terrible, freak accident. But you saved her. You're a hero. A hero." I looked at his hand on my shoulder. The same hand that had just tried to murder my family. "Yeah," I whispered, staring at the dirt. "An accident." Sirens wailed in the distance. The ambulance was coming. They thought they had won. They thought they had scared her into silence, or that the trauma would scramble her memory. They thought I was just the dumb muscle who signed the checks while they ran the family empire. But as the paramedics loaded my weeping, broken wife onto the stretcher, I made a silent vow. I wasn't going to sue them. I wasn't going to yell. I was going to hunt them. I climbed into the back of the ambulance, holding Ivy's freezing hand. As the doors slammed shut, blocking out my brother's fake concerned face, I felt a shift in the air. The war hadn't ended in the Middle East. It had just followed me home. The fluorescent lights in the ICU burned my eyes, but I didn't blink. I hadn't blinked in 3 hours. I sat in the plastic chair next to Ivy's hospital bed, watching the monitors. Her heartbeat was steady but weak. The baby's heartbeat was even fainter, a tiny, stubborn rhythm that refused to quit. The doctor had been blunt. "The next 48 hours are critical. The fall caused internal bleeding. We stabilized her, but the trauma to the fetus, we won't know the full extent until we can run more tests." I nodded like I understood, like I was just another terrified husband waiting for good news. But I wasn't waiting. I was planning. My phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. "Still at the hospital? Morgan and I are grabbing you some food. Hang in there, brother. She's a fighter." I stared at the message. Every word was poison wrapped in sympathy. I typed back slowly. "Thanks. I'm not hungry. Just want to be here when she wakes up." His reply came fast. "Understood. We're praying for you both." Praying. The man who tried to murder my wife was praying. I deleted the thread and opened a different app, one that didn't exist in any app store. It was a piece of software my old platoon buddy, Victor, had designed for counterintelligence ops. It cost more than most people's cars, but when you had billions, money was just a tool. Earlier, when Dominic had hugged me at the bridge, his performance of brotherly concern, I had lifted his phone from his jacket pocket for exactly 27 seconds. Long enough to plug in a data transfer cable disguised as a charging wire. Long enough to clone everything. Now, sitting in this sterile hospital room, I had full access to his texts, emails, calls, and location. I scrolled through the messages, my jaw tightening with every line. There was a thread from 2 weeks ago, between Dominic and Morgan. Dominic, "The clause activates when the kid is born. If Hunter dies, fine. But if the baby survives, we're locked out forever." Morgan, "So what do we do?" Dominic, "We make sure there's no baby. Accident during the trip. Remote location. No cameras. Morgan. And if she survives? Dominic, she won't. And even if she does, she'll be too traumatized to remember. Hunter will be a mess. We'll help him through it. Take over the company while he grieves. By the time he figures it out, we'll own everything. I read it twice. Then I screenshot it and sent it to an encrypted cloud only I could access. They had planned this. They had researched the bridge. They had checked the weather. They had timed it perfectly. My fingers tightened around the phone until the screen protector cracked. A soft knock on the door broke my focus. I slipped the phone into my jacket and looked up. It was Morgan. She stepped inside, holding a coffee cup and wearing the face of a concerned sister-in-law. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she had been crying. She was good. I'd give her that. Hunter, she said softly, setting the coffee on the table beside me. You need to rest. You've been here all night. I'm fine, I said flatly. She sat down in the chair across from me, folding her hands in her lap. The police came by our house this morning. They asked some questions about what happened. I didn't move. What did you tell them? The truth, she said, meeting my eyes. That Ivy lost her footing. That you jumped in after her. That it all happened so fast. Yeah, I said, my voice hollow. It happened fast. Morgan leaned forward, lowering her voice. Hunter, I know you're in shock, but you have to accept that this was just a horrible accident. Blaming yourself won't bring back. I'm not blaming myself. I interrupted, my tone ice cold. She blinked. Then who? I'm not blaming anyone, Morgan, I said, forcing a tired smile. I'm just grateful she's alive. Morgan studied me for a long moment, searching my face for cracks. Finally, she nodded. Good. Because Dominic has been a wreck. He feels responsible. He thinks he should have caught her. Tell him it's not his fault. I said slowly, each word deliberate. Tell him I don't blame him for anything. Yet. The last word hung in the air for just a second too long. Morgan's smile faltered. She stood quickly. I'll let you rest, she said, backing toward the door. Call if you need anything. The moment she left, I pulled out my phone again. I opened the security app one had installed on Ivy's room. I had placed 3 hidden cameras, one in the smoke detector, one in the wall clock, one in the air vent. I also had an ex-military security contractor named Eliza stationed in the hallway, disguised as a nurse. No one was getting near my wife without me knowing. I checked the live feed. Dominic and Morgan were in the hospital cafeteria, whispering urgently. I turned up the audio using the directional mic I had planted in Morgan's purse. He's acting weird, Morgan hissed. He's too calm. He's in shock, Dominic replied. He doesn't suspect anything. Are you sure? Because the way he looked at me. Morgan, relax. The cops ruled it an accident. The hospital staff thinks it's a miracle she survived. Hunter's a billionaire, not a detective. He'll grieve, we'll console him, and in 6 months, we'll be running his empire. Morgan hesitated. And if she wakes up and remembers? Dominic's voice dropped lower. Then we'll handle it. I turned off the feed. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer effort it took not to walk down to that cafeteria and end this right now. But that wasn't the Ranger way. You didn't rush the target. You set the trap. You let them think they were safe. And then you closed the noose. I looked at Ivy's pale face, her chest rising and falling with the help of oxygen. I reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. I'm going to make them pay, I whispered. I promise you. They're not going to see it coming. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Victor. Package delivered. Check your car. I stood, kissed Ivy's hand, and walked out of the room. Eliza, my undercover security, gave me a subtle nod as I passed. I took the elevator down to the parking garage. Inside my truck, hidden under the spare tire compartment, was a black duffel bag. I unzipped it. Inside were 3 things, a Glock 19, a tactical folder full of financial records, and a burner laptop. I opened the laptop. Victor had done his job. He had hacked into Dominic's offshore accounts, his shell companies, his falsified tax returns. Everything I needed to financially destroy him was right here. But I wasn't going to use it yet. First, I needed to break them mentally. I needed them to turn on each other. I needed them to crack before I ever fired a single shot. I zipped the bag shut and climbed back out of the truck. As I walked back toward the hospital entrance, I saw them, Dominic and Morgan, standing by the sliding glass doors, pretending to comfort each other. Dominic saw me and waved. "Hunter, we're heading home. Call us if anything changes." I waved back. I even managed a weak smile. "Thanks for being here. I don't know what I'd do without family." Dominic put his arm around Morgan and nodded solemnly. "That's what family is for, brother." I watched them drive away in their Mercedes. I watched until their taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Victor. "Phase 2. Let's make them paranoid." His reply was instant. "Copy that. The haunting begins tonight." I walked back inside, my face blank, my heart a block of ice. They thought they had won. They thought the hard part was over. They had no idea the Ranger was already inside their walls. I barely slept that night. Every time my eyes started to close in that stiff hospital chair, a different image snapped me awake. Dominic's hand on Ivy's back, the way her body disappeared over the railing, the way Morgan had immediately had a story ready. By sunrise, the world outside Ivy's window was a dull gray. Machines hummed softly. Her face looked a little less ghostly, but she was still deep under. The baby's monitor printed a fragile little heartbeat that made my chest ache. A nurse came in, checked vitals, and glanced at me. "You should go home, sir," she said gently. "Shower. Eat. We'll call if there's any change." I nodded like I was finally giving in. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Maybe a couple hours." I kissed Ivy's hand, whispered a promise only she and I would ever hear, then walked out. Eliza caught my eye in the hallway and gave me a small nod. Everything quiet, no suspicious visitors. For now. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying that faint damp smell from yesterday's storm. I slid behind the wheel of my truck, but I didn't start it right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened a live feed. Victor had already done his work. On my screen, I saw Dominic's living room camera, hijacked from his own security system. It was 6:13 a.m. Morgan was sitting on the couch in one of Dominic's hoodies, hugging her knees, eyes puffy and wide. The smart speakers in the corner lit up blue. A soft sound began to drift through the house. A slow, gentle melody. I recognized it instantly. It was Ivy's favorite lullaby, the one she played in the nursery we'd just finished painting. A simple tune that used to make her smile. Now, in Dominic's mansion, it sounded like a ghost. Morgan jerked her head up. "Dom," she whispered. "Do you hear that?" Dominic walked in from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, frown already forming. "Hear what?" The music grew louder. He froze. What the hell? He grabbed his phone, tapped at the screen, trying to shut off the system. Victor's code ignored him. The lights dimmed on their own. The song kept playing. Morgan was shaking. "Turn it off, Dominic. Turn it off. Turn it off." I watched him slam his mug down hard enough to crack the handle. The speakers cut to silence. Then, just for 3 seconds, Victor played another sound over the system. Splashing water. A single gasp. Then nothing. Morgan covered her ears and screamed. I closed the feed and started the engine. That was enough for today. Just a seed. Just enough to make them jump at shadows while I did the real work. I didn't drive home. I drove back to the bridge. The state park was mostly empty this early, just a couple of cars in the lot. Mist still hanging over the river like a low cloud. My ribs ached from the impact. My muscles were tight from a night in that chair. None of it mattered. I walked the trail alone, hands in my jacket pockets, every footstep bringing back pieces of yesterday in brutal clarity. The scrape of Ivy's laugh. The weight of Dominic's arm around my shoulders. The way Morgan had said, "You guys go ahead, I'll take a picture." I reached the wooden railing and stopped. From here, the drop looked even worse. Jagged rocks, churning water, no easy way out. A perfect accident. I forced myself to breathe slow, to look at this place the way I used to look at enemy compounds overseas, without emotion, just angles and facts. I crouched near the spot where Ivy went over. The wood was scuffed, fresh marks in the grain that didn't match the older weathered grooves. I ran my fingers over them, then scanned the ground around the base of the post. People think crime scenes are clean when the cops leave. They're not. They're just tired. A glint in the wet dirt near the support beam caught my eye. I reached down, pinched it between two fingers, and pulled it free. A tiny, cracked piece of plastic and metal. The remains of a SIM card. I turned it over in my palm. A slow, familiar burn starting in my gut. If someone had panicked, pulled the phone apart, tried to ditch evidence over the side and missed, this is what it would look like. There was mud wedged into the grooves. I wrapped it carefully in a tissue and slid it into an inner pocket. Victor could coax a ghost back to life from less than this. Still crouched, I traced the line of the railing with my eyes, remembering that flash, Dominic's reflection in the map glass. His hand on Ivy's back. The push. I stood and walked along the bridge a few yards, checking the posts, the screws, the angles. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and took a slow, sweeping video, top, sides, path, and the drop below. Not because the cops missed it, but because I might miss something my software wouldn't. On my way back toward the parking lot, a park ranger in a green jacket stepped out from behind a truck. "Morning," he said, giving me a cautious nod. "You the husband?" For half a beat, my training kicked in: scan, evaluate, classify threat. Then I saw the kindness in his eyes, the way he shifted his weight like he wasn't sure if he should say more. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm Hunter." "Name's Grant," he replied. "I was on shift when the call came in yesterday. Saw the rescue report. Most folks don't walk away from a fall like that." "She barely did," I said. "Doctor says it's a miracle." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Look, I'm not trying to make this worse for you, but I walked the scene after the paramedics left. Just habit. Been doing this job 20 years. I studied his face. You see something?" Grant glanced at the empty trail, then back at me. "The official report says she slipped. Lost her footing. But the scuff marks on the rail? The pattern didn't look like a trip to me. Looked more like impact. Like somebody's weight was driven into it." My jaw tightened. "You tell that to the cops?" He nodded. "They thanked me. Wrote it down. Still marked it no foul play suspected." "You got money, right?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "People with money don't like messy stories," he said. "They like clean accidents. Sympathy headlines. Lawsuits that never happen." I held his gaze. "Do you think it was an accident?" Grant shrugged one shoulder. "I think rails don't bruise that way on their own. But I didn't see it. And I don't know your family." He paused. "You want my advice? You keep your own record. Pictures. Notes. Don't rely on the report." Too late. I'd started the second my brother said, "She slipped." "I appreciate it," I said. And I meant it. He nodded once, then headed back toward his truck, leaving me alone with the river again. Back in my car, I pulled out the SIM piece and took a photo of it next to the railing shot, then sent both images to Victor with a single line. "Tell me there's something in here." The reply didn't come right away. Victor didn't rush. He hunted code the way I hunted men: slow, patient, thorough. On the drive back to the hospital, my mind replayed the text thread I'd found on Dominic's phone. "We make sure there's no baby." The words felt like knives. This wasn't just about money. It was about my son not being allowed to exist because he blocked their access to a trust fund. Back in Ivy's room, the beeping monitors were the same steady rhythm. Sitting down, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I talked to her, even though she couldn't hear me. About the bridge. About Grant. About the lullaby playing in Dominic's house. "I'm not going to storm in there," I murmured, brushing my thumb over her hand. "I'm not going to scream. I'm going to tear their world apart so quietly they won't even know where to look." My phone buzzed. "Victor, you're going to like this," his message read. Sim was almost dead, but I pulled fragments. There's a deleted thread between a burner number and Dominic's real phone. Coordinates. Timestamps. The phrase "no cameras" shows up 3 times. "Forwarding you a clean version now." A second later, the screenshots arrived. pixelated in spots, but clear where it needed to be. Dominic, this spot works. No cameras. Old bridge. Slippery railing. Unknown. You sure the wife can't swim? Dominic, not from there. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles went white. There it was. Not enough for a courtroom yet, but enough to know, beyond any doubt, that I wasn't crazy. That what I saw in that reflection was real and planned and paid for. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. They thought the river washed everything clean. Instead, it had spit up a piece of metal the size of a fingernail. And that was going to be the first crack in their perfect story. I looked back at Ivy, at the faint rise and fall of her chest. You hang on, I whispered. I'm building the case. And while I do, my phone buzzed one more time. Victor again. By the way, Morgan just unplugged every speaker in the house. Dominic's yelling at her. Want audio? I smiled for the first time in 36 hours. It felt wrong and right at the same time. Yeah, I texted back. Turn it up. If I was going to bring them down, I needed two things, proof and pressure. I had the first piece of proof in my pocket. The pressure was just getting started. The audio crackled in my earbud, a live feed from Victor's hack. I sat in the dim light of Ivy's room, the steady beep of her heart monitor a grim metronome to the chaos unfolding in my brother's mansion. It was a glitch, Morgan. Dominic's voice was sharp, cutting. You're being hysterical. Smart homes get bugs. I'll call the tech guys tomorrow. A glitch doesn't play her song. Morgan shrieked back, her voice thin and ragged with terror. It doesn't make the sound of splashing water. That wasn't a bug, Dominic. That was a warning. It's her. She's here. She's haunting us. I watched them on my phone screen. Dominic was pacing his vast, minimalist living room, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Morgan was huddled on the floor, her back against the sofa, looking at the unplugged speakers as if they were coffins. Ghosts aren't real, Dominic snapped, his patience gone. But bankruptcy is. I have a company to take over. I don't have time for your childish fantasies. Pull yourself together. He stormed out of the room, leaving Morgan alone with her fear. I leaned back in the hospital chair, a cold, empty satisfaction settling in my chest. The first crack in their alliance. He saw a technical problem. She saw a supernatural threat. They weren't a team anymore. They were two guilty people locked in a house that was quickly becoming their prison. For the next 2 days, I maintained my vigil. I ate when the nurses reminded me, slept in 30-minute bursts, and held Ivy's unresponsive hand, telling her about our future, about the son we were going to raise. I described his room, the little wooden airplane I'd hung from the ceiling, the books we would read to him. I spoke to her as if she were just resting. But every few hours, I would send Victor a new instruction. At 2 a.m., the thermostat in Dominic's house would drop to a chilling 55 degrees, making the air feel damp and heavy, like the riverbank. When Morgan tried to watch her favorite reality show, the channel would randomly flip to a documentary about bridge collapses. The smart fridge, which usually displayed their grocery list, would flicker and for a single second, display a message, I'm cold. Morgan was unraveling. I watched her through the cameras. She stopped sleeping. She refused to be in a room alone. She started talking to herself, whispering apologies to the empty air. Dominic's initial annoyance morphed into contempt. He started staying out later, leaving her to face the ghosts by herself. He thought he was escaping. He had no idea he was just walking into the next phase of my plan. On the third night, the doctor came in with a small, cautious smile. Her brain activity is showing slight improvement, he said. It's not a lot, Hunter, but it's a step. She's fighting. That was all I needed to hear. Ivy was fighting. Now, it was time to escalate my own fight. I sent a text to Victor. Time to send the package. The next afternoon, a sleek, black courier van pulled up to Dominic and Morgan's gate. A man in a crisp uniform delivered a small, flat box wrapped in plain brown paper. No return address. I watched on the camera as Morgan stared at it, her face pale. Don't touch it, she whispered when Dominic walked in. It's from her. Dominic rolled his eyes. For God's sake, Morgan. It's probably a condolence gift from a business associate. He ripped the paper off impatiently. Inside was a simple black photo frame. He turned it over. And then he froze. Even through the low-resolution camera, I saw the color drain from his face. His arrogance evaporated, replaced by a raw, primal fear that was far more satisfying than Morgan's supernatural terror. He dropped the frame on the marble floor. It didn't break. Morgan crept closer. What is it? What's wrong? He didn't answer. He just stared at the picture lying face up. It was a beautiful photo. One of the last ones I ever took of Ivy. It was her, on the bridge, just minutes before she fell. She was laughing, her face turned toward the sun, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. But that wasn't what Dominic was staring at. He was staring at the reflection in her sunglasses. It was a perfect, tiny image, captured by the high-resolution lens of my phone. In the dark curve of her sunglasses, you could see me, looking at the trail map. And just behind her, you could see him, Dominic. His hand was outstretched, not in a clumsy attempt to catch her, but flat against her back, fingers splayed, ready to push. It wasn't courtroom proof. It wasn't a confession. It was a message. It was a single, silent photograph that said, I saw you. Morgan finally knelt and picked it up. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The ghost she had imagined was terrifying, but this was worse. This was real. Who took this? She breathed, her voice trembling. Who sent this? Dominic didn't look at her. He looked directly at the hidden camera in the smoke detector, as if he could feel my eyes on him. The fear on his face was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. He finally understood. The glitches weren't random. The music wasn't a ghost. This was an attack. He knows, Dominic whispered, his voice barely audible. Hunter knows. He snatched the photo from Morgan's hand, his eyes wild. What did you do? Did you talk? Did you leave something at the bridge? I knew you were the weak link. I didn't do anything, she cried, backing away as he advanced on her. It wasn't me. I turned off the feed. The psychological warfare was over. They were no longer afraid of a ghost story. They were afraid of a living witness. The first shot had been fired, not with a gun, but with a piece of photo paper. And it had hit its target perfectly. I looked at Ivy, sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the war I was waging in her name. They're scared now, baby, I whispered, stroking her hand. And scared people make mistakes. I pulled out my phone and sent one more message to Victor. Time to go public. The haunting was over. The hunt was just beginning. Time to go public didn't mean cops or press. Not yet. It meant stepping back into the world Dominic thought he controlled and lighting a match right in the center of it. 2 weeks after the fall, the invitations went out. A charity gala. Black tie. Downtown hotel ballroom. Theme. An evening of hope, honoring Ivy's strength. I saw the digital flyer when it hit my inbox, along with a message from Dominic. We want to honor her fight, brother. All proceeds go to maternal health charities. You should say a few words, if you're up for it. He was unbelievable. He tried to murder my wife and unborn child, then slapped her face on a fundraiser to polish his halo. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling that familiar cold rage. Then I typed back. She'd like that. I'll be there. The night of the gala, I left the hospital for the first time in a suit. Ivy was still out, but stable. Her vitals had evened out. The doctors talked about promising signs. I kissed her forehead, whispered, I'll be right back, and walked out before I changed my mind. Eliza met me at the elevator, no longer in scrubs. Tonight she wore a simple black dress and a discreet earpiece. You're sure you want to do this? She asked. I don't want to, I said. I need to. She nodded once. Victor's got the media feed ready. Files you sent are loaded. One button, and the whole room sees what we want them to see. We rode down in silence. The hotel ballroom looked like every other fundraiser I'd ever sponsored. Soft lighting, floral centerpieces, men in tuxes, women in shimmering gowns, a silent auction table with framed certificates for beach houses and golf trips. My name was all over the place. The Hunter Foundation on banners, on the projection screens, even on the step and repeat where photographers snapped pictures of D-list celebrities and local politicians. But tonight, the man soaking up the attention was Dominic. He worked the room like a seasoned politician, shaking hands, laughing too loud, pulling people in close like they were part of some secret club. Morgan stayed half a step behind him, her smile frozen, fingers clenched tight around a champagne flute she never actually drank from. Our eyes met across the room. For a split second, everything went quiet. Just me and him. Then he pasted on a grief-stricken expression and walked toward me, arms out. "There he is," Dominic said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like expensive cologne and lies. "How's our girl?" "Fighting," I said. "Doctors say she's stubborn." He clapped my shoulder. "That's Ivy. Always was tougher than both of us." "Yeah," I said. "Always was." People circled us, offering condolences, saying variations of the same empty line. "If there's anything we can do." I nodded, thanked them, played my part. The grieving, exhausted husband who was grateful for the show of support. On stage, a string quartet played something soft and forgettable. Morgan eventually drifted over, dark circles under expertly done makeup. "You look better," she said carefully. "More rested." "That's because I'm not the one waking up at 3 a.m. hearing music that isn't there," I said lightly. Her eyes widened. For half a second, she looked like she might drop the glass. I smiled like it was a joke and moved past them to the bar. Victor's voice crackled quietly in my ear. "AV booth is ours." Tech guy took the cash and went on an early smoke break. "Whenever you're ready." There was a schedule inside each program. Welcome speech, video tribute to Ivy, auction, then a keynote by Dominic about resilience in the face of tragedy. I finished my drink, just enough to look normal, not enough to dull me, then slipped through a side door as the lights dimmed and the MC took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight as we honor the courage and strength of Ivy." Backstage, the hotel's AV booth was a cramped space with cables, soundboards, and a guy in a rumpled shirt who nodded at me like we'd never met. Because we hadn't. But Victor had wired his brain and wallet well in advance. "You're Hunter, right?" The guy muttered. "Got your updated file. Said to swap it in before the tribute video." "Appreciate it," I said. He stepped out to take a call, exactly as planned. Alone, I slid a thumb drive into the control laptop. The main screen showed a paused slideshow. Ivy smiling, Ivy at our wedding, Ivy holding blueprints for the women's shelter we were funding. I minimized it and opened Victor's file. A single 3-minute video sat there, labeled with the same name as the tribute. "Last chance to back out." Victor's text popped up on my phone. I stared at the file thumbnail, at my reflection in the dark window of the booth. "No," I typed back. "Play it." I walked out just as the MC said, "And now, a short video celebrating Ivy's light." The house lights dimmed further. Conversations quieted. All eyes turned toward the towering screens around the room. The first image that appeared was Ivy, laughing in our kitchen, flour on her nose. People smiled, some even clapped softly. The next clip was her at a charity build, hair in a messy bun, hammer in hand. The room melted, bathed in warm nostalgia. Then the screen flickered. One by one, the lights around the ballroom adjusted, Victor dimming them just a bit more, pushing people's focus into the glow of the video. The next frame appeared. Text messages. Huge, crisp, white-on-black bubbles, filling the screen. "Dominic, the clause activates when the kid is born. If Hunter dies, fine. But if the baby survives, we're locked out forever." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The words held for a long, uncomfortable beat. Next message. "Morgan, so what do we do?" Chairs shifted. Someone laughed nervously, thinking it was some kind of dark joke. Then, "Dominic, we make sure there's no baby. Accident during the trip. Remote location. No cameras." The room went dead quiet. You could hear the ice settling in glasses. I didn't look at Dominic. I watched the crowd instead. Faces turned toward our table. Toward him. Confusion. Then realization. Then something worse, revulsion. On the screen, more messages rolled. She won't. And even if she does, she'll be too traumatized to remember. Hunter will be a mess. We'll help him through it. Take over the company while he grieves. The final line sat there, huge and undeniable. I finally turned. Dominic was on his feet, pale as the tablecloth, staring at the screen like he could will it to shut off. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. Morgan had both hands over her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. Not dramatic, not staged. Pure, animal panic. Someone at a nearby table whispered, too loud, Is that real? Another voice, Those are their names. Then the screen shifted again. The photo, the same one I'd mailed him. Ivy on the bridge. The wind in her hair. Sunglasses shiny and dark. The image zoomed slowly, like a heartbeat closing in. Closer, closer, until the only thing on the 20-foot screen was the reflection in her lenses. Me. The trail map. And behind her, clear enough for every person in that room to see, Dominic. Hand out, braced on her back in a way no one could mistake as trying to catch her. The ballroom felt like a courtroom suddenly, without a judge, without a jury foreman. Just 200 witnesses holding their breath. The video cut to black. Silence. Then the house lights came up a notch, revealing every expression, every turned head. The MC stammered into the mic. I'm so sorry. We seem to be having some. I stepped onto the edge of the stage and took the microphone from his hand. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. That wasn't a glitch, I said. You all just saw exactly what it looked like when my brother and his wife planned to murder my family for money. A few people gasped outright. Someone at the back said, Jesus Christ. Dominic finally snapped out of his shock. Hunter, he said, forcing a brittle smile. I don't know what sick joke this is, but those messages are obviously fake. Deep fakes, or they were pulled from your phone, I said, cutting him off. Clone the night Ivy went off that bridge. I swung back to him. I let the silence work on him, on them. I didn't come here to beg for sympathy. I continued. I came here to let every investor, every board member, every charity partner know who you've actually been dealing with. Security hovered near the walls, unsure who they were supposed to remove. Dominic's charm cracked. The smooth, apologetic mask slid, and something mean and sharp flashed through. You have no proof any of that is real, he snapped. Anyone can. Then sue me, I said. Publicly. Make this bigger. Put it all under oath. A nervous, disbelieving laugh burst from someone. They quickly shut up. Morgan stood up so fast her chair toppled. Dominic, she whispered, voice shaking. Tell them it's fake. He didn't answer her. He was staring at me like he wanted to rip my throat out. I stepped back, handed the mic to the stunned MC, and walked off the stage. Behind me, the room erupted into noise, shouting, questions, phones being pulled out, cameras filming everything. I didn't look back. Eliza fell in beside me near the exit, expression flat, professional. That was a nuke, she said quietly. It was a warning shot, I replied. The nuke comes next. My phone buzzed as we stepped into the cool night air. A new text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Alone. You went too far tonight. It was from Morgan. The text from Morgan glowed on my screen. We need to talk. Alone. You went too far tonight. I didn't reply. Not immediately. A response gives power. Silence creates doubt. I let her stew for an hour while I drove back to the hospital. Eliza stayed in the lobby, blending in with the night shift, while I went up to Ivy's room. The quiet beep of the machines felt louder tonight. The adrenaline from the gala was fading, replaced by a heavy, cold exhaustion. I sat by her bed, tracing the 4-line taped to her hand. I hit them hard tonight, Ivy, I whispered. Dominic looked like a cornered animal. But the scary thing? He didn't look sorry. Just angry. My phone buzzed again. Morgan, please. He's losing it. He thinks I gave you the messages. You have to tell him I didn't. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. This was the fracture point. I typed back. Meet me. Old Industrial Park off, Route 9. Warehouse 4. 1 hour. Come alone, or the deal is off. She didn't ask what deal. She was desperate enough to assume there was one. 40 minutes later, I was parked in the shadows of the abandoned textile factory my father had bought decades ago and never developed. Rain had started to fall, a light, miserable drizzle that slicked the cracked pavement. Headlights cut through the dark. A silver Audi, Morgan's car. She parked 3 spots away, killed the engine, and sat there for a long minute. She was terrified. Good. When she finally stepped out, she looked small. The polished, arrogant woman from the gala was gone. Her hair was wet, her coat pulled tight, her eyes darting around the empty lot like she expected a sniper. I got out of my truck, leaving the door open, the interior light casting a long shadow. Did you bring a wire? I asked, voice low. No. She held up her hands, shivering. I swear. Hunter, you have to stop this. Dominic is tearing the house apart looking for bugs. He hit me tonight. He actually hit me because he thinks I'm the one who leaked those texts. I leaned against my truck, crossing my arms. Why would he think that? Because I'm the only one he sent them to, she cried. He deleted them from his phone immediately. He thinks I kept screenshots as leverage. Smart man, I said. I didn't, she sobbed. I was loyal to him. I did everything he asked. Loyal. I stepped closer, letting my anger simmer just below the surface. You watched him push my pregnant wife off a bridge, Morgan. You stood there and helped him invent a story about a slip. That's not loyalty. That's being an accomplice to attempted murder. She flinched. I was scared. He said it was the only way to save the company. He said a lot of things, I interrupted. Like how he'd take care of you. How you'd both be rich. How I'd never find out. I pulled a manila envelope from my jacket pocket. Do you know what this is? She shook her head, eyes locked on the packet. It's a draft of a plea deal, I lied smoothly. My lawyers drew it up. Full immunity for testifying against Dominic. You walk away. No prison time. Maybe even a little start-over fund. Her hand twitched toward it. You would do that? I don't care about you, Morgan, I said coldly. I want him. He's the architect. You're just the pawn. I held the envelope out, but when she reached for it, I pulled it back. But I need something first. What? She whispered. Proof that he wasn't just jealous, I said. Proof that he knew something about the baby. Something about the trust fund. She froze. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine, deep-seated guilt. Not fear. Guilt. He made me get the medical records, she stammered. From the clinic. Before you even announced the pregnancy. What records? The genetic testing, she said, her voice barely a breath. He wanted to know if the baby was healthy. Because if the baby had issues, the trust wouldn't vest the same way. But the baby was fine. Perfect. That's why he had to. She trailed off, realizing what she'd just admitted. She had confirmed the motive. Premeditated. Cold-blooded. Okay, I said, handing her the envelope. Take this. Read it. Don't sign it yet. Just show it to him. Show him. She looked at me like I was insane. He'll kill me. No, I said. Tell him I offered it to you. Tell him you turned it down because you're loyal. Tell him I'm desperate and trying to flip you. Why? Because, I said, opening my truck door, it will make him trust you again. And when he trusts you, he gets careless. That's when you get me the rest of what I need. She clutched the envelope to her chest, rain plastering her hair to her face. And if I do, you promise I walk. I promise, I lied. I watched her drive away, taillights fading into the rain. The second she was gone, I pulled out my phone. Did you get that? Victor's voice came through clear. Every word. Audio is crisp. Video from the dash cam is decent too. Send the photos to Dominic. Now, Victor asked. She's still driving. Exactly, I said. Send them now. I imagine the scene. Dominic, pacing in his office, bottle of scotch in hand. His phone buzzes. An anonymous number. He opens it. A series of high-resolution photos taken from a telephoto lens across the parking lot. Photo 1. Morgan's car parked next to mine in a deserted warehouse district. Photo 2. Me handing her a thick envelope. Photo 3. Morgan clutching the envelope, looking terrified but conspiratorial. No audio. No context. Just the visual of his wife meeting his enemy in the dark, taking a package. He's going to lose his mind, Victor said, sounding almost impressed. He already has, I replied, starting the engine. I'm just giving him a target. The rat was in the trap. And now, the trap was about to snap shut. Back at the hospital, I walked into Ivy's room, shaking the rain off my coat. The night nurse looked up from her chart. Mr. Hunter, she said, her voice tight. Dr. Evans was just looking for you. My stomach dropped. Is she okay? Did something happen? She's awake, the nurse said softly. She woke up 10 minutes ago. But what? She's confused, the nurse said. She's asking for you. But she's also asking about the test. The test? I frowned. What test? The paternity test, a voice said from the doorway. I turned. Dr. Evans stood there, holding a clipboard, looking grave. We ran routine blood work when she was admitted, he said. Standard procedure for trauma in pregnancy. But we found a flag in her file. A request for a DNA comparison that was processed through a private lab 3 months ago. I never ordered a DNA test, I said. We know, the doctor said quietly. The request didn't come from you. It came from a D. Hunter, Dominic. And the results? I asked, my throat dry. The baby is yours, Hunter. 100%, Dr. Evans said. But the test also screened for hereditary markers. Rare ones. He stepped closer. Your brother wasn't just checking paternity. He was checking for a specific genetic anomaly. One that runs in your family. One that, according to your father's will, would disqualify an heir from controlling the voting shares of the company. The world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just about the baby surviving. It was about proving the baby was unfit. And when the test came back clean, when it proved my son was perfect, Dominic realized he couldn't disqualify him legally. So he had to disqualify him permanently. I looked past the doctor, into the room where Ivy was stirring. The game just changed. It wasn't just murder. It was a corporate hit job plan before my son even had a name. Can I see her? I asked. Briefly, Evans said. Keep it calm. I walked to the bedside. Ivy's eyes were open. Glassy, tired, but open. Hunter, she croaked. I'm here, I said, taking her hand. The test, she whispered. Dominic. He told me. At the bridge, before he pushed. What did he tell you? She squeezed my hand, weak but desperate. He said, your kid is too healthy for my retirement plan. Rage, pure and white hot, flooded my veins. He had taunted her. He had gloated. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Victor. Dominic just left his house. He's driving fast. GPS says he's heading toward the warehouse district. He thinks Morgan is still there. I looked down at Ivy. Rest now, I said, kissing her forehead. I have to go finish this. Hunter, she whispered. Be careful. Careful is done, I said. I walked out of the room. Dominic was hunting a ghost in a warehouse. But the real threat was coming for him. And this time, I wasn't bringing a camera. The rain had turned into a deluge by the time I got back to my truck. The wipers slapped frantically against the glass, fighting a losing battle against the storm. My phone lit up with a map. A red dot. Dominic was moving erratically through the warehouse district. He was driving in circles, likely screaming into his steering wheel, looking for Morgan, looking for me, looking for anyone to blame. But I wasn't going to the warehouse. I was going to the bank. Not a regular bank. A secure, private vault facility downtown that handled high-value assets for the city's elite. It was 2 a.m., but when you have my level of clearance and the kind of leverage I was about to use, doors open. Victor, I said into the hands-free system. Is the kill switch ready? Ready and waiting, Victor replied, his voice calm against the static of the storm. But are you sure, Hunter? Once we execute this, there's no going back. You tank the stock. You freeze the assets. You burn the company to the ground to smoke him out. Do it, I said. Initiate the protocol at 9 a.m. sharp when the markets open. But right now, I need you to get me into the encrypted server of the family trust. Already in, Victor said. Sending you the bypass key for the physical vault. I parked in the underground garage of the vault facility. The security guard, a retired Marine named Stan who knew me well, looked surprised but buzzed me in without a word. Late night, Mr. Hunter? Early morning, Stan, I said, moving past him toward the steel elevators. Just need to check a file. Down in the sub-basement, the air was cool and recycled. I scanned my palm, entered the bypass key Victor had sent, and the heavy steel door of box 404 hissed open. Inside wasn't gold or cash. It was paper, old paper, my father's original estate planning documents. The ones Dominic swore were destroyed in a flood at the law firm 5 years ago. But my father was paranoid. He had kept copies, and he had told me, on his deathbed, if Dominic ever gets greedy, check the box. I had never checked. I trusted my brother. I pulled out the leather-bound folder and flipped to the addendum dated 3 months before Dad died. My eyes scanned the legal jargon until they hit paragraph 14, section B. In the event of the primary heir's incapacity or death, control of the voting share shall pass to the secondary heir, Dominic, provided that said secondary heir has no record of financial malfeasance or criminal activity. If such record exists, all assets revert immediately to a charitable trust managed by the board, and the secondary heir is disinherited entirely. And then, stapled to the back, a handwritten note in my father's shaky script. Hunter, I found the transfers. Dominic has been skimming from the Asia accounts. I covered it up to save the family name. But if he ever tries to take the chair, use this. Attached was a bank statement from 6 years ago, a transfer of $4 million to a shell company in the Caymans. Signed by Dominic. My breath hitched. Dad knew. He knew Dominic was a thief. He had protected him, but he had left me the weapon to stop him. Dominic wasn't just killing Ivy and the baby for the future money. He was killing them because if I ever audited the books, which I would have done when the baby was born to set up the new trust, I would have found the old theft. He wasn't just greedy. He was desperate. He had been living on borrowed time for years. I took a photo of the documents. Victor, I said, voice hard. Change of plans. We don't wait for the market to open. We trigger the criminal activity clause in the trust bylaws. Now, that will lock him out of everything, Victor said. His credit cards, his house access, his car, even his company email. He'll be a ghost in the system. Exactly, I said. Make him a ghost. I walked out of the vault with the file under my arm. My phone buzzed. A notification from the tracking app. The red dot, Dominic, had stopped moving. He was parked on the bridge. The bridge. My blood ran cold. Victor, I snapped. Where is Morgan? Her phone is stationary, Victor said. At her sister's place in the suburbs. Why? Because Dominic isn't at the warehouse anymore. He's at the bridge. Why would he go back there? To destroy evidence? To relive the crime? Or? A terrifying thought hit me. I dialed the hospital. Eliza. Status. Quiet, she whispered. Ivy is sleeping. Nurse just checked her. Double the guard, I ordered. And check the perimeter. I have a bad feeling. I floored the truck, tires screeching as I peeled out of the garage. The rain hammered the roof like bullets. I drove like a madman, running red lights, heading for the bridge. When I arrived, the scene was desolate. Just the rain, the dark river, and a single car parked near the trail entrance. Dominic's Porsche, engine running, driver's door open. But Dominic wasn't there. I grabbed the flashlight from my glove box and my Glock from under the seat. I moved toward the trail, weapon drawn, scanning the darkness. Dominic, I yelled over the roar of the wind. Nothing. I reached the bridge, the spot where Ivy fell. There was something taped to the railing. A plastic bag, flapping in the wind. I approached it cautiously, checking for tripwires, for ambush points. The ranger in me was screaming trap, but the brother in me needed to know. I ripped the bag open. Inside was a phone. A burner. It rang the second I touched it. I answered. Where are you? I growled. You think you're so smart, Hunter. Dominic's voice slurred. He was drunk. Or manic. Or both. Sending me pictures of my wife? Turning her against me? She turned herself when she realized you were a monster. I said. It's over, Dom. I have the papers. Dad's papers. You're done. You're broke. He laughed. A wet, ugly sound. I'm not broke yet, little brother. I still have one asset left to trade. You have nothing, I said. Don't I? There was a shuffling sound on the line. Then a muffled whimpering. Say hello to Uncle Hunter, Dominic whispered. My heart stopped. Who is that? I demanded. You thought you had the hospital locked down, Dominic said. You thought your little security girl was enough. But you forgot one thing, Hunter. I built that wing of the hospital. I have the blueprints. I know the service tunnels. If you touch her, I snarled, my vision tunneling. Oh, I'm not at the hospital, Dominic said breezily. I learned my lesson. Direct confrontation is messy, so I went for leverage. Who do you have? The one person who can make you surrender, he said. The one person Ivy loves more than you. The whimpering came again. A female voice. Older. Hunter, help me. It was Martha, Ivy's mother. She lived 2 hours away. He must have grabbed her hours ago, while I was playing games with Morgan. He had been 2 steps ahead while I was celebrating my victory. Let her go, Dominic. I said, my voice shaking with fury. This is between us. It is, he agreed. And we're going to finish it. Meet me where it started, Hunter. But not on the bridge. Under it. Under it. The old maintenance platform. Access from the river road. Come alone. No Victor. No cops. Or Martha takes a swim. And she doesn't float as well as Ivy. The line went dead. I stood there in the rain, the burner phone crushed in my hand. I had played the long game. I had used psychological warfare. I had used the law. But Dominic had just flipped the board. He wasn't playing corporate chess anymore. He had gone full feral. I looked over the railing at the black water below. I had underestimated him. I thought he was a greedy coward. I was wrong. He was a desperate predator. And now, I had to go down into the dark with him. I threw the burner phone into the river. Victor, I said into my headset. He has Ivy's mother. He's under the bridge. I'm calling SWAT, Victor said instantly. No, I said. He'll kill her before they even breach the gate. This has to be me. Hunter, he's baiting you. It's a kill box. I know, I said, checking the chamber of my Glock. But I'm not walking in there as a CEO. What do you need? Cut the power to the entire park. Streetlights, bridge lights, everything. Give me total darkness. Done in 2 minutes. I turned and headed for the steep, muddy trail that led down to the riverbank. The Billionaire was gone. The Ranger was going to work. The descent was brutal. Rain-soaked rocks turned into slick, treacherous footing. I slid more than I climbed, gripping exposed roots and rusted metal handholds bolted into the hillside decades ago. My boots fought for purchase on the muddy trail, and twice I nearly pitched forward into the dark. But the Ranger training held. Balance. Breath control. Eyes forward. The roar of the swollen river grew louder as I descended. By the time I reached the riverbank, my jacket was soaked through, my hands scraped raw, but my grip on the Glock was steady. The old maintenance platform was a relic from when the bridge was first built, a narrow steel catwalk suspended under the bridge deck, accessible only by a rusted ladder chained to the support pylons. It was condemned, forgotten, and perfect for an ambush. I clicked my earpiece. Victor. Status. Power's cut. Entire park is dark. Emergency services are getting calls, but dispatch thinks it's storm damage. You've got maybe 15 minutes before someone comes to investigate. Copy, I whispered. If I don't check in within 10, send everything to the feds. The documents, the audio, all of it. Hunter, 10 minutes. I repeated and switched off the mic silence, except for the river and the rain. I approached the ladder. Rust flaked off under my fingers. The first rung groaned under my weight, but held. I climbed slowly, testing each step, weapon holstered but ready. Above me, the underside of the bridge was a cathedral of shadow and steel. Water dripped through the gaps in the deck, creating a constant pattering sound that masked footsteps. At the top of the ladder, the platform stretched out in both directions, a narrow graded walkway, maybe 3 feet wide, hugging the curve of the support beam. No railings, just open air and a 40-foot drop to the churning black water below. In the center of the platform, illuminated by a single battery-powered lantern, sat Martha, Ivy's mother, 63 years old, silver hair plastered to her face, hands zip-tied behind her back, ankles bound to the chair, duct tape over her mouth. Her eyes were wide with terror, tears mixing with rain. And standing behind her, one hand gripping her shoulder, was Dominic. He looked like a corpse, eyes bloodshot, suit jacket soaked and torn, hair wild. In his other hand, he held a pistol, a snub-nosed revolver, pressed loosely against Martha's temple. "There he is," Dominic said, his voice hoarse. "The hero, right on time." I stepped onto the platform, moving slowly, hands visible. "Let her go, Dom. This isn't her fight. Everything became her fight when you decided to destroy me." Dominic snarled. "You humiliated me in front of the entire city. You froze my accounts. You turned Morgan into a paranoid wreck. You even took my father's legacy and weaponized it against me. You did that yourself," I said evenly, taking another careful step forward. The platform swayed slightly under my weight. "You stole from the company. You tried to kill my wife. You forfeited any right to sympathy. I built that company." Dominic screamed, his voice cracking. "While you were playing soldier overseas, I was closing deals, managing portfolios, keeping the empire alive. And what did I get? Second place. Always second. The spare air. The backup plan. So you decided to eliminate the competition," I said, edging closer. "Starting with an unborn child." Martha whimpered behind the tape, her whole body trembling. Dominic's face twisted. "That baby was going to lock me out forever. You think I wanted this? I didn't want to push her, but you left me no choice." "There's always a choice," I said. "You just chose wrong." "Wrong?" He laughed bitterly. "Wrong was trusting you to stay in your lane. Wrong was thinking you'd keep playing the dumb jock who signs where I point. But you got smart, didn't you? You started digging. You brought in that hacker friend. You set traps. And you walked into every single one," I said. His jaw clenched. The gun trembled slightly. "So what now, Hunter? You going to shoot me? Your own brother." "I'm not going to shoot you," I said quietly. "I'm going to let the system do it. Murder. Attempted murder. Embezzlement. Kidnapping. You're going to rot in a cell." "No," Dominic said, shaking his head. "No, I'm not. Because if I go down, I'm taking you with me. I planted evidence in your office. Emails. Transactions. By the time I'm done testifying, the feds will think you were the one skimming funds. That you orchestrated Ivy's fall to fake your own victimhood. I'll say you've been setting me up from the beginning. No one will believe that," I said. "Won't they?" Dominic grinned, manic and sharp. "Rich husband. Prenup disputes. Life insurance policies. You're the one with motive, Hunter. I'm just the grieving brother trying to hold the family together." I took another step. We were 10 feet apart now. "Let Martha go," I said. "Then we settle this. Just you and me." "You think I'm stupid?" Dominic hissed. "The second I let her go, you put a bullet in my skull." "I'm not armed," I lied, raising my hand slowly. He squinted at me, suspicious. "Show me. Lift your jacket." I hesitated. Then slowly, I reached for the hem of my jacket, lifting it just enough to show my empty waistband. The Glock was tucked into a concealed holster at the small of my back, hidden by the angle. Dominic relaxed a fraction. "Smart. You came to negotiate." "I came to end this," I said, "one way or another." "Then here's the deal," Dominic said. "You sign over your voting shares. Transfer them into a holding trust one control. You walk away from the company, from the board, from everything. And in return, Martha goes free. Ivy stays safe. You get to play house with your little family while I run the empire the way it was always supposed to be run. And if I refuse? Dominic cocked the hammer on the revolver. The sound was deafening in the small space. Then Martha gets baptized. Permanent-like. Martha's muffled scream cut through the rain. Okay, I said quickly, raising my hands higher. Okay, you win. I'll sign. Dominic blinked, surprised. Just like that. Just like that, I said. I'm not losing anyone else to your greed. You want the company? Take it. But let her go first. No, Dominic said. You sign first. I have the paperwork in my car. We walk up together. You sign in front of a notary app witness. Then she walks. How do I know you won't kill her anyway? You don't, Dominic said simply. But it's the only offer on the table. I stared at him, at the desperation in his eyes, at the way his finger twitched on the trigger. He meant it. He would kill her. But he had made one critical mistake. He assumed I came alone. Victor, I whispered into the dead mic, knowing he couldn't hear me but needing to sell the illusion. Green light. Dominic frowned. What did you just? The platform shuddered violently. Not from the wind. From a precisely placed shaped charge Victor had rigged to the support beam 2 days ago, back when we first identified this location as a potential choke point. The explosion was small, more concussive than destructive, but it rocked the catwalk hard enough to throw Dominic off balance. He stumbled backward, the gun swinging away from Martha's head. I moved. 3 strides. Fast. Low. I tackled him at the waist, driving him backward into the steel railing. The revolver went off, a deafening crack, the bullet ricocheting off metal somewhere above us. We hit the deck hard, grappling. Dominic was stronger than I expected, fueled by adrenaline and rage. He drove a knee into my ribs, knocking the wind out of me. But I was trained for close-quarters combat. I trapped his wrist, twisted, and slammed his gun hand into the grated floor once, twice, until the revolver clattered away into the darkness. You bastard! Dominic gasped, clawing at my face. I pinned him, forearm across his throat. It's over. Behind us, Martha was sobbing, still tied to the chair, but alive. Dominic's eyes were wild, darting. You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine. Wrong, I said, reaching into my jacket. I pulled out a small recording device. I've been recording since I climbed up here. Kidnapping, extortion, confession to attempted murder. His face went white. You set me up? No, I said, hauling him to his feet. You set yourself up. I just gave you the rope. Sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees. Victor had called them the second the charge went off. Dominic sagged in my grip, defeated. They're going to destroy you too, you know? The board. The investors. They'll never trust you again. I don't care, I said. I'm not doing this for the company. I'm doing this for my family. Police flooded the platform minutes later, cutting Martha free, cuffing Dominic, reading him his rights. I stepped back, letting them work, my hands shaking as the adrenaline finally crashed. One of the officers approached me. Mr. Hunter? We'll need a statement. Later, I said hoarsely. I need to get back to the hospital. Understood, sir. We'll send someone over. I climbed back up the ladder, every muscle screaming, and walked to my truck. My phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Ivy is asking for you. She's fully awake. Vitals are strong. The baby is stable. I sat in the driver's seat, rain hammering the roof, and let out a breath I'd been holding for weeks. Dominic was in custody. Martha was safe. Ivy was awake. But as I started the engine and pulled onto the dark road, I knew this wasn't over. There was still one more move to make. One final reckoning. Because Morgan was still out there. And she had just lost her leverage. The hospital was quiet when I arrived. That eerie 4 a.m. stillness where even the fluorescent lights seemed dimmed by exhaustion. I moved through the corridors on autopilot, my wet boots squeaking on the polished floors, my ribs aching with every breath. Eliza met me at the elevator, her face tight with concern. You look like hell. Feel worse, I muttered. Status. Ivy's stable. Doctor cleared her for visitors. She's been asking for you nonstop. Eliza paused, studying my face. But there's something else. My hand instinctively moved toward the concealed holster. What? Morgan called the hospital 30 minutes ago. Asked if Ivy was awake. The nurse thought it was a welfare check. Gave her the room number before I could intercept. Ice flooded my veins. Where is Morgan now? Her phone's off. No GPS. She went dark right after the call. I pulled out my phone, texting Victor. I need eyes on Morgan. Last known location. Vehicle. Everything. His response came back in seconds. Already tracking. Her car is parked 2 blocks from the hospital. Engine cold. She's been there at least 20 minutes. 20 minutes. She was already inside. Locked down Ivy's floor. I snapped at Eliza. No one in or out without biometric clearance. Get hospital security to sweep every stairwell, every storage room, every. A scream cut through the quiet. High-pitched. Terrified. It came from Ivy's floor. I ran. The stairwell door slammed open as I hit the landing, my legs burning, heart hammering against my cracked ribs. Eliza was right behind me, radio crackling as she called for backup. When I burst through the door to the ICU wing, chaos had already erupted. Nurses were huddled behind the station desk. A security guard was on the floor, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. And standing in the middle of the hallway, wild-eyed and trembling, was Morgan. She had a scalpel in one hand. The other hand gripped the arm of a young nurse, barely out of school by the look of her, using her as a human shield. Stay back. Morgan screamed, her voice cracking. I just want to talk to her. I just need 5 minutes. I raised my hand slowly, stepping into her line of sight. Morgan, look at me. Her eyes snapped to mine. Red-rimmed. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Hunter, she gasped, almost relieved. Tell them to let me through. I need to see Ivy. I need to explain. She has to understand. Understand what? I asked, keeping my voice calm, steady. That you watched your husband try to kill her? That you helped cover it up? I didn't have a choice. Morgan sobbed, the scalpel shaking in her hand. He said if I didn't go along with it, he'd ruin me. He'd tell everyone about the affair, about the money I took from the charity fund. I was trapped. The young nurse whimpered, tears streaming down her face. Let her go, I said gently. She didn't do anything to you. Neither did I. Morgan shrieked. I didn't push her. That was all Dominic. I just stood there. I didn't know what else to do. You called 911, I said. You could have told them the truth. And lose everything? She laughed bitterly. You don't understand what it's like, Hunter. You've always had money. You've always had power. I married Dominic to escape a trailer park and a mother who drank herself to death. I wasn't going to throw that away. So you let an innocent woman almost die instead, I said, my voice dropping to a cold edge. Morgan's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I can fix this. If I can just talk to Ivy, if I can explain. Explain what? A weak voice called from down the hall. Everyone froze. Ivy was standing in the doorway of her room, one hand gripping the 4-pole for support, her hospital gown hanging loose on her thin frame. Her face was pale, but her eyes, those fierce, beautiful eyes, were locked on Morgan with a clarity that cut through the madness. Ivy, no. I started toward her, but she held up a hand. I want to hear this, Ivy said, her voice hoarse but steady. I want to hear what you think you can explain. Morgan's grip on the nurse loosened slightly. Ivy, I never wanted you to get hurt. I swear. I tried to talk him out of it. Liar. Ivy said flatly. Morgan flinched. You stood on that bridge. Ivy continued, taking a slow, painful step forward, and you smiled at me. You told me the view was beautiful. You told me to get closer to the edge so you could take a picture. And when I turned my back, you didn't scream. You didn't warn me. You just watched. I was scared, so was I. Ivy's voice broke, raw and guttural. I was terrified. I felt his hands on my back, and I knew it wasn't an accident. And as I fell, The last thing I saw was your face. And you weren't scared, Morgan. You were relieved. Morgan shook her head violently, tears streaming. No, no, you wanted me gone, Ivy said, her voice trembling with rage. You wanted my baby gone. Because as long as we existed, you and Dominic were just parasites living off Hunter's success. But with us dead, you'd finally matter. That's not true, Morgan screamed. Then why are you here? Ivy asked. Why are you holding a scalpel? Why are you threatening innocent people? Morgan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Because you're scared, Ivy said softly. Because Dominic got arrested, and now you're alone. And you know there's no way out. So you thought if you could get to me, if you could silence me, maybe, just maybe, you could still walk away. Morgan's hand trembled violently. The scalpel slipped slightly in her grip. But you can't, Ivy said. Because I remember everything. And I'm going to testify. And you're going to prison. Something inside Morgan snapped. Her face went blank. Her grip on the nurse tightened. The scalpel rose. And then I moved. I closed the distance in 2 strides, catching Morgan's wrist mid-swing. The scalpel clattered to the floor. The nurse broke free, stumbling backward into the arms of another security guard. Morgan collapsed, sobbing, all the fight drained out of her. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. 2 officers appeared from the stairwell, hauling her to her feet, reading her rights as they cuffed her. She didn't resist. She just kept repeating the same hollow apology, over and over, like a broken record. As they dragged her away, she looked back at Ivy one last time. I really am sorry, she whispered. Ivy didn't respond. She just turned and walked back into her room, her shoulders shaking. I followed her inside, closing the door behind us. She made it 3 steps before her knees buckled. I caught her, guiding her back to the bed, and she clung to me, sobbing into my chest. I thought she was going to kill that girl, Ivy gasped. I thought, she's gone, I murmured, stroking her hair. It's over. Dominic's in custody. Morgan's in custody. It's over. Ivy pulled back, her tear-streaked face searching mine. Is it? Really? I hesitated. Because the truth was, I didn't know. There were still loose ends. Financial audits. Legal battles. Media fallout. The company was in chaos. The board would demand answers. Investors would panic. But as I looked at Ivy, bruised, exhausted, but alive, I realized something. I didn't care about the company anymore. I didn't care about the empire, the legacy, the billions. I cared about this. About her. About the tiny heartbeat still fighting inside her. Yeah, I said finally, pulling her close. It's really over. She rested her head against my chest, and for the first time in weeks, the hospital room felt quiet. Peaceful. Outside, dawn was breaking over the city. The storm had passed. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a small, cold voice whispered a warning. Dominic was in a cell. Morgan was in a cell. But they still had lawyers. They still had allies. They still had one final card to play. And I had a feeling the worst was yet to come. The worst didn't come with bullets. It came with subpoenas. Within days of the hospital's siege, the story broke. Not the sanitized version Dominic had always controlled, but the raw, ugly one. Attempted murder, inheritance fraud, embezzlement, a pregnant woman shoved off a state park bridge by her own brother-in-law. Reporters camped outside the hospital. Talking heads on TV debated my sanity, Dominic's guilt, Ivy's miracle survival. Some people thought I was a hero. Others thought I was a billionaire spinning a revenge narrative. The only opinions that actually mattered wore suits and carried case files. Prosecutor Natalie Rhodes met us in a quiet conference room off the ICU a week after Morgan was arrested. She had sharp eyes, calm hands, and zero interest in flattery. You understand, she said, sliding a folder across the table. This case is strong, but not bulletproof. No pun intended. I flipped it open. Photos of the bridge. The text messages Victor had pulled. The SIM card forensic report. The financial records from my father's vault. My own recorded audio from under the bridge. And Ivy? I asked. Her testimony? Natalie glanced through the one-way glass at the woman sleeping in the hospital bed next door. Her memory returning is a gift. Her recollection of Dominic's words on the bridge? That's powerful. But the defense will attack it. Trauma, morphine, suggestibility. They'll say she's repeating what you want her to remember. I'm not putting words in her mouth, I said quietly. I know, Natalie said. But their job is to make the jury doubt that. Our job is to make them feel it in their bones anyway. And Morgan? Ivy's voice was weak but steady from the bed. What happens to her? Natalie didn't sugarcoat it. Right now, she's charged as a co-conspirator. But she's also terrified and angry at Dominic. If she flips, she could be our best witness. If she doesn't, she's another target to dismantle on cross. Ivy stared at the ceiling. Let her flip. I turned to her. After everything she did, she didn't push me, Ivy said, eyes filling. She didn't save me either. But if her talking puts him away forever, let her talk. Natalie nodded. I'll offer her a deal. Reduced time in exchange for full cooperation and no surprises on the stand. She looked between us. You two need to decide what justice looks like. Prison is a given. How loud, how public, how scorched earth this gets. That's on us. I don't care if people think I'm a saint or a monster, I said. I care that he can't touch my family again. Good, Natalie said. Because he's coming for you in court. Hard. She wasn't exaggerating. 3 months later, we walked into a packed courtroom that smelled like old wood and stale coffee. And Dominic turned to look at me like I was a stranger he'd once nodded to at a country club. Jail had stripped away the polish. His suit was county-issue gray. His hair was grown out and uneven. But the arrogance was still there, coiled behind his eyes. Judge Preston sat high on the bench, expression carved from stone. The jury, 12 tired people who hadn't asked for this, watched everything like they were afraid to blink and miss the moment that decided our fate. Ivy sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, a supportive brace under her loose blouse, one hand resting on the small swell of her belly. Our baby had hung on. Every ultrasound was a quiet miracle. Dominic's lawyer, a smooth, tan man named Kyle, stood to give his opening statement. This case, Kyle began, pacing slowly, is not about a monster and a hero. It's about a tragedy twisted into a weapon. 2 brothers. One successful, one more successful. Old resentments. A dangerous, rainy bridge. An accident nobody wanted. Rebranded as attempted murder when grief curdled into rage. He painted Dominic as the loyal sibling, the numbers guy, who kept my empire running while I chased thrills overseas. He called Ivy's fall a freak misstep, the SIM card unreliable, the texts easily fabricated. And Mr. Hunter, Kyle said, turning toward me, is not just a grieving husband. He is a man with billions on the line, a man who benefits from removing his brother from the succession picture entirely. Natalie let him talk. Let him spin. Then she stood. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, you're going to hear a lot of words in this courtroom. I'm going to ask you to remember one thing when it all starts to blur. Gravity doesn't lie. She clicked a remote. The big monitor on the wall lit up with the photo I knew too well. My wife on the bridge, laughing, sunglasses reflecting the world behind her. We all know what a fall from this height looks like, Natalie said. We've seen the rescue reports. We've heard the park ranger's testimony. You don't lightly bump someone into a 40-foot drop. You drive them. The image zoomed in. Ivy's sunglasses filled the screen, then the tiny reflection. Me with the trail map, Dominic behind her, hand flat on her back. You'll hear how this photo was taken seconds before she went over, Natalie said quietly. You'll hear from digital forensics about how it hasn't been altered. And you'll have to ask yourselves, does this look like a man trying to catch his sister-in-law, or a man lining up the shot? Dominic shifted in his chair. We called witnesses, Grant the park ranger, who spoke about the rail marks, Victor, who walked the jury through the recovered texts and SIM data in plain language, Martha, whose voice shook as she described the chair on the maintenance platform and the gun at her head. But the day Ivy took the stand, the room changed. She walked slowly, carefully, one hand unconsciously protective over her stomach. Sworn in. Seated. The microphone adjusted. Natalie approached her gently. Can you tell the jury, in your own words, what you remember from that day on the bridge? Ivy glanced at me, then back at the jurors. It was supposed to be a family day, she said. I was happy. I was scared about the baby, but happy. Dominic was joking around. Morgan wanted pictures. They kept telling me to stand closer to the edge, so the shot would be epic. Her voice wavered. She took a breath. I remember turning to look at the water, she continued. I put my hand on my belly. I was about to say something to my son. And then, I felt pressure between my shoulder blades. Hard. Not a bump. A shove. Did you lose your footing? Natalie asked softly. No. Ivy said, meeting the juror's eyes. My feet left the ground. Someone lifted my center of gravity and threw it forward. I knew before I even started to fall that I wasn't slipping. I was being pushed. Did you see who pushed you? Yes. Ivy's jaw clenched. As I went over, I turned my head. I saw Dominic's face. He was smiling. You could have heard a pin drop. And while you were in the water, do you remember anything he said? Natalie asked. Ivy swallowed. When Hunter pulled me out, I looked up. Dominic was leaning over the rail. He thought I couldn't hear him. He said, Guess your kid was too healthy for my retirement plan after all. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Kyle objected, of course. Hearsay, misremembered trauma, but Judge Preston overruled. The jury may consider the statement as alleged, he said. Wait, not admissibility. Then it was Kyle's turn. He tried to pick her apart. Suggested the drugs had clouded her memory. That Hunter had filled in blanks over weeks at her bedside. That she was under emotional pressure to support my version of events. Mrs. Hunter, Kyle said, voice low and sympathetic. Isn't it possible that what you feel happened is different from what actually occurred? Given the trauma, the coma, they know. Ivy cut in, her voice suddenly hard as steel. What you're asking is if I'm confused about whether my child was almost murdered. I'm not. I felt his hands. I heard his words. I know the difference between a brother-in-law and a killer. Kyle flinched. The jury watched her like she was the only person in the room. When Morgan took the stand next, it wasn't dramatic. It was pathetic. She cried. She wiped her nose. She admitted the texts. She admitted knowing the plan. She admitted saying nothing. I thought he wouldn't really do it, she whispered. I thought it would scare her. That he'd change his mind at the last second. By the time I realized he wasn't, it was too late. Who came up with the idea of using the bridge? Natalie asked. Dominic, Morgan said, voice cracking. He researched places with no cameras. He timed the weather. He told me, once she's gone, Hunter will fall apart. We'll be there to pick up the pieces. And the maintenance platform incident with Martha? Morgan squeezed her eyes shut. He said if Hunter didn't back off, he'd finish the job from underneath. I didn't know he really took her there until the news. By the time she stepped down, Dominic's defense was hanging by a thread. Still, Kyle dragged the trial out. Motions, objections, attempts to discredit Victor's tech work, to suggest the shaped charge under the bridge made me the dangerous one. Judge Preston shut down the worst of it, but every day in that room was another knife twist. On the final day of testimony, as we waited for closing arguments, Dominic turned in his chair and looked straight at me. There was no pretense left, no brotherly warmth, just cold hatred. You think this ends with a verdict? He murmured, too low for the mics. I didn't answer. He smiled faintly. You burned the empire to save your little family. Let's see if they thank you when the dust settles. Before I could respond, the bailiff called the room to order. Court will reconvene for closing arguments, Judge Preston said. Then the jury will be instructed and begin deliberations. I reached for Ivy's hand under the table. She squeezed back. Whatever the jury decided in that room, one thing was already true. We were never going back to the life we had before the bridge. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. In a case with this much complexity, financial records, digital forensics, family drama. 5 hours is nothing. It usually means one of two things. They are hopelessly deadlocked, or they made up their minds before they even walked into the room. When the foreman stood up, he didn't look at Dominic. He looked at Ivy. In the matter of the people versus Dominic Hunter, he read, his voice steady in the silent courtroom. We find the defendant guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree, kidnapping, extortion, grand larceny. Dominic didn't scream. He didn't lunge. He just sat there, turning into a statue, as the reality of a life sentence without parole crashed down on him. Morgan took a plea deal. 7 years in minimum security for her testimony and cooperation. It wasn't enough for some people, but it was enough to ensure she never came near us again. As the bailiffs cuffed Dominic, he looked back one last time. Not at me. At the empty air where his future used to be. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I just felt quiet. 3 years later, I stood on the deck of the cabin, watching the sun dip below the tree line. The air up here was thin and clean, smelling of pine and wood smoke. No city smog. No boardrooms. No press conferences. We had sold the penthouse. Sold the shares. Sold the entire controlling interest in Hunter Corp to a private equity firm. The check was astronomical, enough to fund 10 lifetimes, but I put almost all of it into a blind trust for charitable grants. I kept enough to build this place. To disappear. Dada, look, I turned. A toddler with messy brown hair and Ivy's fierce eyes was sprinting across the grass, holding up a muddy rock like it was a diamond. Whoa, I said, crouching down to inspect it. That is a serious rock, Leo. Did you dig that up yourself? Yes. Leo beamed. For Mama. She's gonna love it, I said, scooping him up. He was perfect. He had a small scar on his knee from a tumble yesterday, and he loved blueberries, and he was terrified of thunder. But he was here. He was alive. The doctors had been worried about long-term effects from the trauma, from the oxygen deprivation in the water. But Leo defied them all. He was stubborn, just like his mother. Ivy walked out onto the porch, drying her hands on a towel. She looked different now. The shadows under her eyes were gone. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt, her hair loose. She didn't look like a billionaire's wife. She looked like herself. Dinner's almost ready, she said, smiling as Leo wiggled to get down and present his rock. Oh wow. Thank you, baby. It goes right on the collection shelf. She kissed his head and sent him running back to his pile of dirt. Then she came to stand beside me at the railing. You okay? She asked softly. Yeah, I said. And for the first time in years, I meant it. I was just thinking about the bridge. She stiffened slightly. We didn't talk about it often. What about it? I was thinking about how fast a life can change, I said. 1 second, you're looking at a trail map. The next, you're in the water. And then, you're here. Ivy rested her head on my shoulder. We aren't just here because we survived, Hunter. We're here because you fought. We both fought, I said. Maybe, she whispered. But you made sure we won. The nightmares still came sometimes. I'd wake up sweating, hearing the splash, seeing Dominic's face. But they were getting fewer and farther between. The silence of the mountains helped. I looked down at my hands. These hands had signed billion-dollar contracts. They had held a gun to a man's head under a bridge. They had pulled a drowning woman from a river. Now, they built tree houses. They chopped wood. They held my wife. It was a good trade. My phone buzzed inside on the counter. I ignored it. It was probably Victor sending his monthly update. He was running his own cybersecurity firm now, keeping an eye on things for us from a distance. Last I heard, Dominic was in a maximum security facility in Nevada. He had tried to file an appeal based on ineffective counsel, but it was thrown out. He spent his days in the library, reading law books, trying to find a loophole that didn't exist. He was still trying to control a world that had forgotten him. Morgan sent a letter once, from prison, apologizing again, asking for forgiveness. I burned it in the fireplace without opening it. Forgiveness is for people who make mistakes, not for people who make plans to kill you. Hunter. Ivy nudged me. Earth to Ranger. I smiled, pulling her close. Sorry, just drifting. Well, drift back, she said. Leo wants you to push him on the swing before we eat. On it, I said. I walked down the steps into the yard. Leo was already waiting by the tire swing I'd hung from the big oak tree. Higher, Dada. Higher, he squealed as I pushed him. I watched him soar up toward the sky, laughing, fearless. He didn't know about the bridge. He didn't know about the uncle who wanted him dead. He didn't know about the trust funds or the court cases. He just knew he was safe. And that was the only legacy that mattered. The sun finally vanished behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The first stars were coming out. I wasn't Hunter the CEO anymore. I wasn't even Hunter the Ranger. I was just a man pushing a swing, with a woman on the porch who loved him, and a son who would never, ever have to wonder if his father would catch him when he fell. I caught the tire swing on its backstroke, stopping it gently. All right, buddy, I said. Dinner time. Leo hopped down and grabbed my hand. His grip was small and warm. Dada? He asked, looking up at me. Are we staying here forever? I looked back at the cabin, at Ivy waving from the door, at the piece we had carved out of the wreckage. It's a small click for you, but it helps me keep bringing you these intense stories. Speaking of stories, I want to write exactly what you want to hear next. Are you craving more military revenge thrillers? Or maybe something different, like dark psychological mysteries, undercover agent stories, or perhaps a survival horror? Let me know in the comments exactly what genre or type of plot you want me to tackle next. I read every single suggestion, and the next epic story could be yours. Until next time, stay safe, watch your back, and keep listening.